obviously the harvests that they were getting were super abundant. So when you bring in the tithe, if they brought in 10%, if it was a year that wasn't as good of a harvest, not as much would come in. If it was a really good year, a lot would come in because of the proportionality of it. Well, what they're saying is this: the people are just bringing in by droves nonstop. Obviously, God is blessing them, and here they are bringing up from their blessings. Look what God is doing here. So what he does in verse 11 is he says, Hezekiah commanded them to prepare rooms in the house of the Lord, and they prepared them. So either they had rooms on the outside of the temple that they converted to storage areas, or it could be they may have had to add on, put an addition onto the temple, because you just don't want to leave all this stuff sitting outside in the weather. So they have to do some things in the temple to be able to take care of the abundance of what is going on here. And so they do that. And then what he has to do, he says, we obviously need some guys whose going to be full-time job is organizing, taking in the stuff, and making sure everything gets distributed. We just need people to take care of this full-time. We need to expand the staff here. And so what you have is a bunch of individuals who are listed. You have some who are the heads of it, and then others are appointed underneath them for taking care of all of this. And so you have that bunch of lists of names going down through verse 15. So you can see here what they did in Jerusalem led to the blessing of God in Judah. And the people who had gotten right with God were with gratitude bringing in their things, and it was amazing, constant stream, more than what could be handled. And so they now have to change and make changes and organize and add on and do what they need to get all of this done. Well, as you come here, why is it that you have all this abundance and have all of these things? It was, of course, God who was doing all of this. But actually, if you remember, when it started with Hezekiah, and the chronicler began with this, he set his heart to honor God. And when he set his heart to honor God, he then went to the priests and went to the people, and he said, this is what we need to do. We need to please God. One man whose purpose was to honor God led a nation to getting things cleaned up and honoring God to be able to have the blessing of the Lord. This aspect of the religious changes not only began as we looked a couple chapters previously, and we see the heart of Hezekiah, but he bookends it again with the heart of Hezekiah in verse 20. Thus Hezekiah did throughout all Judah, and he did what was good, right, and true before the Lord his God. Every work which he began in the service of the house of the Lord, in law and in commandment, seeking his God, he did with all his heart and prospered. Wow, what a couple incredible verses here. So let's kind of unpack these two verses and take a look at what is going on here. First of all, notice in verse 20, there are three characteristics of what he did before the Lord, or with respect to the Lord. In other words, where he began his decision-making process and what to do and all these things, it began with, what does the Lord require? What is God's will in the matter? In other words, what does God have to say about this? And it tells us he was seeking the Lord. And when it speaks about him seeking the Lord here, what I think is very interesting is, as you look at the grammar, it refers to the fact of something that he was continually doing, or the methodology of how he went about to do things. So when presented with a problem, or presented with a difficulty, or a challenge, or something that's going on, what he did first, And what he did throughout the whole thing, his methodology is this: God, I need your help. I need your guidance. What a great lesson that it is for us as well. That when it comes to challenges, when it comes to day in and day out, what should be our mindset and our methodology? Where's our starting point from beginning? And then also, how do we carry it through to the end? What does God think about this? What is God's opinion about this? What is God's will? That was basically touching every aspect of everything that he did. So, for example, how did Hezekiah know that it was okay to put the Passover by a month and celebrate it? Because in the book of Numbers, it tells us there's 2 reasons why God would allow the Passover to be celebrated the next month. The people didn't have enough time to assemble, and then also if there was defilement. Guess why he put it off for 2 months? For 1 month. The people and the priests were defiled, and the people didn't have enough time to come. How would he have known that except that he sought the will of God through the Word of God? So you see that is really at the heart of everything. But when it came to making decisions, it was always looking at everything from God's perspective. So what is good in God's opinion? What is right in God's opinion? What is true in God's opinion? Here's the thing. The word good, as we have here, is a word which means beautiful, desirable, pleasing. One of the things that we find, and I think in Christianity today, is that who determines what is beautiful? Do we determine what is beautiful, or does God declare what is beautiful? One of the words that we use a lot of, and we've been using it for about 30, 40 years in Christianity, is that of, preference. Whatever your preference is, whatever you like, that's okay. So haven't we kind of done this with church services? You can go to the marketplace of churches, and you get all the different flavors of the types of churches. And what do we say? Whichever church pleases you and your desires, that's where you ought to go. Is that kind of line up with what we see in the Scriptures? I don't think so. How about churches that have 3 different services? A conservative service, a contemporary service, and a middle of the road between the 2 service. You just come to the one that you like. So what we've done is defined beauty and pleasingness by what we define it to be, rather than how God defines beauty and what is pleasing to him. Hezekiah did not make decisions based upon what do I think is beautiful, but rather, here's what God says is beautiful. This is what God declares is desirable. And we change our desires and our preferences to be in line with his word, to be in line with him. The next one here is what is right. And it simply means that which is upright. Is the idea we would use the term in the New Testament, righteousness. So righteousness refers to meeting a standard. So, for example, when you take a square, a speed square, we'll take a speed square for example. What they will tell you is that this speed square is within a certain fraction to the thousandths or whatever, guaranteed to be square, to be within the 90-degree standard. Who defines the standard of righteousness? God does. And only that which measures up to his standard is called upright or righteous. Anything that is off by any degree or fraction, even to the 100th millionth degree, is not actually upright. In other words, the decisions that Hezekiah was making is saying this: God has set the standard of right and wrong. Our job is to recognize what God's standard is, and we conform to it. And that's what Hezekiah did. The third one is that which was true. The word here is, interestingly, is referring to dependability or trustworthiness. So everything he did was out of dependability or trustworthiness with respect to the Lord. Let's think of it this way. All the decisions that he made was out of loyalty to the Lord. The Lord considered him trustworthy and dependable because he was loyal. Remember we said his decision was God's first in everything. So he says, my loyalty is to God. That's where my loyalty lies. So when it came to God and when it came to making decisions and such, what does God declare that is beautiful? What does God declare that is pleasing? What does God declare that is right? And I am going to make decisions based upon how God defines it. But also, every decision I make is going to be based upon my loyalty to God. He's first and foremost in everything. That's what we find. And in verse 21, once he determined those three things, and when he made his decisions, whatever it was, as he sought the Lord, what did he do it with? All his heart. He gave everything to it. Once he figured it out, once he knew God's will, once he got it all taken care of, now let's do it, and let's give everything we got to the Lord. Let's do the best that we can. Let's get going on this. Let's just make sure that we give our all to God. And as a result of that, what does it say? He prospered. What a great pattern Hezekiah has left for us. If we want to prosper, how can we prosper? God declares, God is the standard. God declares all of these things. We need to say, what does God say about this? God, we need to know what you are telling. We need your truth. We need the Bible. And in that, we're going to find what is pleasing or what is beautiful. We're going to see what is right. And we are going to act out of loyalty to you. And when we do that, we too, when we give our all, we will then have the blessing of God. Hezekiah had that blessing. Think about this. Why is it that Israel had that blessing? Or why did Judah have that blessing? Because there was one man who said, people, come with me. Let's work together and let's honor the Lord. So think about this. If we want our homes to prosper, guess what that means? As parents, that's our consideration. That's where we'll see prosperity. As husbands who are the leaders of our home, if we make this the criteria and a pattern that we follow, we can have not only the blessing of God in our life, but we can see our family have the blessing of God as well. In our church, if the pastor and deacons follow this, what an example it is to the church to follow. And as men, we are leaders in the church. If we as men do this together, think of the prosperity that can come to our church. It's any sort of leadership position, whatever it may be, that God is in. Follow this pattern, and God will prosper. Does it mean things are going to always be easy? No. There's actually a lot of challenges that Hezekiah is facing at the same time on the political front. The chronicler has chosen not to do that because what is of the greater significance? Putting the Lord first in everything, and everything else gets worked out. The challenges that will come in chapter 32 and what we'll also see in Isaiah on the political and the world scale, Hezekiah is really, the heat is being put to him. But you'll see how he continually seeks the Lord in the political realm and how God blesses them as well. And that's what we'll begin to start focusing on next time. Any questions or anything we see about Hezekiah? Great guy. I mean, just a great king. Just some really awesome stuff that we can learn from Hezekiah's life.